So today's video is going to be about how we can build chords, different ways to build chords to give you some ideas in your own music and your own compositions, because I think it's a ton of fun and there's lots of cool ways to build chords. So let's get into it. Hey, I'm Isaac Schanno Johnson, and if you don't know me, I'm a musician, composer, producer, and I make videos about all that fun stuff, music composition, music production. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to see videos like this in the future. So I want to make a video about how we can make different chords and use different intervals to make different chords, because sometimes you get kind of stuck or bored, or you don't know what to do with the harmonies and stuff that you already know, and you need some new ideas. So hopefully you can get some new ideas from this. So I'm going to be using Twinkle Twinkle Little Star as an example of how we can hear and get used to what these different types of harmonies sound like. So I'll be playing it on piano, harmonized in all the fun ways that we're going to get into. To start us off, most chords are built in thirds. That means they're built in tertian harmony. I'll put up those words. They use thirds, so you have stacked thirds to make different chords. This is basically what people call functional harmony. This is used for jazz music and pop music and classical music and electronic music, and a lot of different types of music use tertian harmony. It's probably the most common type of harmony that I've heard. And it's one sound if you want to use that in your music. They're basically stacking the interval of a third. So you have a major third and then a minor third. That makes a major triad. If you have a minor third and then a major third, that makes a minor triad. And you can keep stacking them on and on and on until you get crazy chords like C major 7, sharp 11, 13, and 9. Or you could have other crazy chords like E13, with all of these stacks of thirds on top of each other. Basically, it makes triads and seventh chords. So if we take a listen to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star harmonized with tertian functional harmony, chords built in thirds, this is what we have. But there's lots of other ways that we can make chords too. You don't just have to make chords with thirds. You could make chords with seconds. Eric Whitacre does this in his music all the time. He builds chords with seconds. He often uses clusters. Clusters are chords that are built with seconds or other close intervals. So let's say we build a chord with C, D, E, F, and F sharp. That's a cluster. And it's all built in seconds. You could also build chords with like E, F sharp, G, A, B. That could be another cluster, right? You could build chords with clusters however you want to. Some fun ways to do this that I like to do in my own music is to start with clusters and then revoice it so that you don't have everything in the same place. So you don't necessarily have B, C, D, E all played together, but maybe you have C on the bottom, then above that E, then above that B, and then above that D. It's kind of a chord built in clusters, but in that case, that basically makes a C major 9 chord. So you can use this stuff to make different ideas and think of different ways of voicing chords that you already know. So let's say we take that same C major 9 chord, and rather than playing it C, E, G, B, D with thirds, we could play it C, G, B, C, D, E. So it has a different sound. It still sounds like a C major 9 chord, but it doesn't sound like it's voiced the same as C, E, G, B, D. Now, we could do this with lots of other chords too, right? You could take a minor 7 chord. I personally really like this voicing. Is you take a minor 7 chord or a minor 9 chord, and instead of placing it or voicing it in thirds like you normally do, E, G, B, D, F sharp, you take the 7th, the root, and the 9th and the 3rd and play them all together. So you have D, E, F sharp, G all played together, and E in the bass. That's another way that you could play this type of harmony. You could also get pretty crazy with clusters because, well, they're clusters and like it's music, so you can do whatever you want. But another thing you could do is put chromatic notes together. So you could do a cluster that's F sharp, G, A, B flat, B. Now that'll sound pretty harsh because you have all these minor seconds played together, but that could be another sound if that's the sound that you want. You could find a way to voice that or just play it like that if you want to get a specific clustery sound. It's something that Charles Ives does a lot in his music, is uses dense clusters. Same with, sometimes Stravinsky does this too. If you listen to the famous horn part from Rite of Spring, that has clusters in it too. Now, if we listen to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star harmonized with seconds, we can have a very different sound than if we harmonize it with thirds. And let's hear Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but harmonized with some more chromatic and more dissonant clusters. So you could also stack fourths in the same way that you stack thirds. So rather than having C, E, G, you could have C, F, B flat. So this is a sound that Debussy uses a lot in his music, and Coltrane also uses a lot in his music. They both have these stacked fourths on top of each other to give it this different sound, this more unique sound than tertian functional harmony. One thing you can do with it is use it as a way to kind of play functional harmony. So let's say we take a C major 7 chord and we want to voice it but in fourths with quartal harmony. Well, we can have C in the bass because we want it to sound like a C major chord. And above that, we can play B, E, and A. So respectively, that's the 7th, 3rd, and 13th of the chord. And if you add on top of that one more fourth, up above A, we have D, which is the 9th. So we're playing a C major 13 chord, but with quartal harmony. And it has this different sound than just voicing it C, E, G, B, D, A. If we take a listen to what that sounds like, we can hear, if we listen to a 2-5-1 in the key of C major, so that's D minor 7, G7, and C major 7, then we can hear that it still sounds like those chords, and it still sounds functional. It still sounds like functional harmony, but it still sounds like a 2-5-1, but we're hearing this quartal sound above it. Now, I'm saying quartal, not chordal, Chordal. This is something that often is confusing about talking about quartal or fourths harmony, is because it sounds almost the same as chordal, like you're just playing chords. But it could give your music this different sound. If you just take a normal chord progression and play it with fourths voicings, that's playing fourths but to outline the certain chords that you want to play, you could play a 1-5-6-4 or the 4-chord song with quartal harmony, and it'll give it this more interesting sound, and I think more interesting sound, and it'll give it some flavor that you don't normally hear with that same chord progression. You might have to change around the notes a little bit to make it fit with those chords and with fourths, but check out what it sounds like. It sounds pretty cool. So let's take a listen to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but harmonized with fourths. And if we harmonize it with fourths in a different way, we can get a different sound. Next way we could build chords is in fifths. Now this is going to sound similar to fourths because if we flip our intervals around, they become different intervals. So let's say we take C to G, that's up a fifth. Well, let's flip it. So we have G to C, now it's a fourth. So those two are going to sound very related, and if you stack fifths, it has this really open sound. So if that's what you want in your music, use some fifths. And Debussy does this, and other jazz composers like Coltrane do this too, and it gives it this open, broad sound because you have, well, one, notes that are all spaced apart, but also they're the same interval. So rather than playing C, F, B flat, E flat, which is stacked fourths, quartal harmony, we could stack fifths and play C, G, D, A. Now this is going to sound like if we start from G and play G, D, A, E, it's going to sound like the open strings on a violin because violin, viola, cello are tuned in fifths. You could use this in your compositions if you want to. It definitely sounds different than thirds, and it sounds a little different than fourths as well. So you can use it to give yourself a little more open sound, a little more open texture if you want your music to sound like that. Finally, let's take a listen to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but harmonized in fifths. Those are a couple different ways that you can write your chords and create different harmonies with different intervals. If you wanted to do sixths and sevenths, you'll end up getting the same intervals as thirds and seconds because, as we explained before, if we flip intervals around, they become a different interval. So if we have C to B, which is a major seventh, if we flip that around and play B to C, that's a minor second. And because of that, writing chords with fifths is going to sound like fourths because fourths and fifths are switched, and writing chords with sixths is going to sound like thirds because thirds and sixths are switched. And if we write our chords with sevenths, those will sound like seconds because sevenths and seconds are switched around. So these chords don't necessarily have the same analysis as tertian harmony. It's a little harder if you see these in a piece of music, it's a little harder to write them as Roman numerals, but they can give you a more interesting sound and they can give you a different flavor if you've never heard that before in your music. That's a whole lot of fun to play with. So those are a couple different ways that we can write harmonies. We don't necessarily have to write our harmonies all with thirds, only using triads and seventh chords. You can write harmonies with fourths or fifths or whatever intervals you want, and it'll give you this different sound, and it's a whole ton of fun to play with. Honestly, if you're writing some music, play with this. Please mess around with it. See what sounds you can come up with. It'll give you lots of new ideas and lots of fun, different ways of thinking about music. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. I hope you learned something about music. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for watching. See you next time. Peace.